At CBTS, experienced pastors mentor and prepare the next generation of men for ministry. Theological training lays a crucial foundation, but it's the wisdom and presence of a pastoral mentor that truly equips a man for the challenges of Christian ministry.
One thing I love about CBTS is that what we're learning is not just theoretical, but it's pastoral, it's practical, and should be lived out in our lives.
Welcome to another episode of the Covenant Podcast brought to you by Covenant Baptist Theological Seminary. This is a resource which exists to equip listeners with theological content from a 1689 Baptist perspective. My name is Austin McCormick. I'm one of the pastors of Covenant Baptist Church in Clarksville, Tennessee. I have with me my co-host, Dr. Dewey Dovell, one of the pastors of Emmanuel Reformed Baptist Church in SeaTac, Washington. And today we have the special privilege to welcome a married couple onto the Covenant Podcast, Michael and Ashley Emadi. Welcome, guys.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yes, it's our privilege to have this conversation with you. The title of our episode is Surviving Seminary as a Family, a very important practical subject, especially to our audience who very likely is either considering seminary, has been in seminary, or perhaps some of our listeners are preparing for that time. And several of the men who might be in classes are married. So we want to have this important subject about how to survive seminary as a family. But before we jump right into the content of this very important question, Professor Emadi, can you spend some time introducing yourself to our audience?
Yeah, my name is Michael Emadi. I have been married to Ashley for almost 17 years now, come November. We have 3 kids, and currently we are missionaries in the Republic of Ireland. And we have been here for almost 11 years. Just in a few more months, it'll be 11 years that we've been living here. We live in a small town called Dundalk, which is about an hour almost due north of Dublin and just south of the Northern Irish border by like 10, 15 minutes. So we've been living overseas now for over a decade. And this is where it feels like home anymore. So that's kind of what we're doing at the moment. But as you said, I am a professor for CBTS, and I have throughout the many years I have taught for CBTS, taught all the different language courses. It's Greek, Hebrew, and currently this semester I'm teaching Latin 1, Greek 3, Hebrew 1, and Hebrew 3. And so I try to have my hands in all the languages that I can, and it's enjoyable to me, and I have fun. And hopefully that comes across to the students that this is fun to do.
The CBTS polyglot. Oh, we're thankful for you, brother. I'm very thankful to have had several classes with you, and they were fun. I think several of the students could sympathize with the experience that I'm about to give, that taking the classes with you makes the biblical languages, a joy. And that is always a goal. You don't want to come away from the biblical languages feeling like this is just complete begrudgery, but actually have a joy for the biblical languages. And I'm very thankful for how you approach teaching the languages with that aim. I very much love the languages, and in large part due to your instruction and your influence. Very thankful for you. And even the times where things were very difficult, like in Greek 3, whenever you did push us through the ringer, brother, very, very thankful for your efforts and labors. But Dewey, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, Michael, I have to ask, just out of personal curiosity, if all these different languages that you've mastered and have proficiency in, do you find yourself ever thinking in a different language other than English, or dreaming in a different language? Or are you at that point? I remember in high school having a Spanish teacher that said she would dream sometimes in Spanish, so that wasn't her native language. I'd be just curious for my own humor and interest if that's ever happened to you.
Oh yeah. So the first language that I learned before any of the biblical languages was Persian, because my dad is from Iran. I wanted to be able to speak to that side of my family. And so I spent several years learning Persian. And that does happen. I'll not often, but every once in a while, you end up dreaming, and you're just having this whole entire dream in this foreign language. And you understand what's going on. But yeah, it's really weird. Hasn't happened with Greek or Hebrew or Latin, but definitely with Persian. That has happened to me.
Well, that's awesome, brother. I'm so grateful for men like you, as Austin said, teaching the future pastors, missionaries, godly men in the church, the biblical languages. And I know it's a great joy and service of yours. And I'm encouraged hearing Austin's testimony, but I'm also encouraged to have your wife with us for this conversation. Austin's already mentioned this is a very important conversation today. One that I wish, as I was going through seminary, that I would have had the opportunity to not just hear from a man who's gone through seminary and a man who is very much steeped in the local church and the academy, but to have the perspective of a wife who has gone through those things and has been at your side as you've navigated this journey. So, Ashley, thank you for being with us today. We're honored to have you. I think Austin said you're the third woman to be featured on the Covenant podcast. We probably only have 3 women who listen to this program regularly. But in any case, we're very grateful to have you here today. And as we prepare to dive into the details of your experience being married to a seminary professor, at one point in time a seminary student, and also being on the mission field, I'd love to hear a little bit about just how God brought y'all together, what your experience has been like as a couple, maybe a behind the scenes look into that dynamic, and then anything that you want to share related to your time on the mission field. I think our listeners would appreciate hearing what you have to share.
Yeah. I have to say it is a genuine joy to be married to Michael. He I love the way his mind works. It fascinates me. I wish he would talk to me more. I probably sound like every other wife who's going like, "Will you talk to me?" But I really, you guys get that in his classes. It's just he always comes from a different perspective. So I've really, really enjoyed that part of being married. Um, he did not like me when we first met. He was not impressed at all. He thought I was a very brown, brunette, blonde. But just over time, we kept getting thrown together in our church. And eventually, one day, we both kind of realized, oh, you're kind of interesting. And then the relationship grew from there. I think we started dating, was it April or May, sweetie?
May of 2008.
May of 2008. He left and went on a missions trip for 6 weeks.
Mhm.
And then he came home and he proposed to me in August, and we were married in November. So I think he and I are both very decisive people who know what we want. And we were like, let's do this. So we got married while he was in seminary. And I knew that coming into it. And then we moved to Utah so that he could work while he finished the degree. And I very quickly got pregnant, and we had our first 2 kids before he finished the degree. He finished it right as we had our daughter. And then we moved when she was 2 weeks old to Houston, Texas, for him to get his master's of biblical languages. And while we were doing that, so two basically infants, babies, I nannied to make a little bit of money on the side. And so we had ended up with 3 kids, 3 and under, in the house while he was working on his second master's. And then when we were there in Houston, Stephen Murphy, who was the pastor of Dundalk Baptist Church, asked us to go to Ireland. And we went and we saw it. And I was like, these people are lovely and wonderful, and kind of fell in love with the Ireland that he had fallen in love with. And we decided to move. So we moved when our third child had just turned 1 year old. And so I feel like we've kind of hit every aspect of the like typical jobs that you can have in Christian circles. We were married through seminary, masters, moving to the missions field overseas with very young children, and then now he's a pastor. So it's been interesting. It's been a very interesting journey. It's not what I thought life would be like, but I love it. Like it is, we have a great life together.
Praise God. And praise the Lord for bringing the two of you together. It's not good for man to be alone. Thankful for God's wisdom and kindness in instituting marriage. And yeah, thank you for tracing out your journey a little bit and talking about where you were whenever you had uh, the number of children that you had. I'm sure that there are several listeners who are thinking, man, I've got one little one right now, or I've got two little ones right now, or I'm staying up till midnight right now after my kids go to sleep, or I'm getting up at 4 or 5 a.m. so I could do something. So looking forward
Yeah.
to our listeners engaging with this, because I'm sure that they could sympathize with a lot of the experiences that you guys have went through. And as we mentioned off camera, this is a subject that you guys have been asked about, because there are
We
so
have.
many people that are wrestling with how to survive seminary whenever they've got so much going on. So let's get to our question now. I'll start with Professor Emadi. As someone who has completed multiple degree programs, what advice would you give to our listeners about surviving seminary as a student?
Yeah, I think one of the things that is fundamental to anything that we say from this point on is having a biblical priority order of who you are as an individual. And what is that priority order? Well, the priority order is that you are a Christian first, that your walk with God is of utmost importance, and that relationship is primary for who you are. After that, so second is that if you're married, you're a husband, right? That is the most important horizontal relationship that you have on this earth. So it's God always first, then your wife. Then if you have kids, kids are third. And then after that, it's seminary, it's job, it's pastoring, right? And that has to be the priority order. And I think that's very biblical. And I want to give credit where credit's due. I mean, that comes straight out of Tom Askell's chapter in a book called Dear Timothy. And, I read that early on. And I think maybe Ashley and I were just married or were still dating and had her read that chapter. And that thought process is pretty much fundamental to how we lived the rest, well, up until this point in our lives. Because I'll tell you why, because if that priority order gets out of whack, your life will start to fall apart. So if you put your wife in the number one slot, not only have you dethroned God, but you've made your wife to be God, and she will always fail you. And so your relationship with your wife is going to suffer. Your spiritual relationship with God is going to suffer. You can't do that. Same thing is if you take seminary and you make it, you move it up, let's say above your kids, above your wife. You may do great at seminary, you may pass all your classes, but the result is by the time you're done with seminary, you're going to have drifted so far from your wife that you're going to look at what you accomplished and wonder, was it worth it? And I say that having spoken to many men who graduated from all different seminaries across the country, who have told us by the end of their seminary degree, they were almost divorced because of the time, the effort that has to be invested. And it is an important thing that they're doing, but if it moves up that priority order to become second or even third, you're going to do well, but you're going to cause problems in your marriage. And so, really anything that comes from this talk as a whole, I think that has to be the basic starting point of live out the priority order. It's God first, then your wife, then your kids, and then seminary, then job, then church. And I say that to even men who are pastors while they're going to seminary, is recognize that as great as it is to be a pastor and love the church, you will love your church best if you love your wife more. And so if you put the church ahead of your wife, You may do great things in the church and destroy your marriage, which then kind of disqualifies you from doing the job that you're there to do. And so that priority order is fundamental to all of this. And I'll say one more thing here. Ashley and I really from the time that we got married, we viewed everything that we did as us. And so it wasn't me going to seminary. It was us going to seminary. We were going to seminary. Now I was doing the classes. I was getting the degrees in biblical languages. She didn't not want to sit in any of those classes. But we were doing it together. And that was our mindset, is we are doing this. So we did seminary. We did the master's degree in Houston. We are on the mission field. And everything was viewed as a team. And I think that mentality just has helped us and to recognize that we do things by communicating together, saying, here's what we are doing as a couple, as a family, and not, okay, well, you go do seminary and then I'll go do my thing. Because the moment you do that, you now put yourself kind of on different tracks heading opposite directions. And so you have to kind of hold together the idea that this is us. We can do this, and we'll work together to make the outcome of this good, so that you graduate seminary, your marriage is strong, you love your spouse, and you get to move on from there. So yeah, fundamental is that priority order, I think.
Brother, I love that priority order. I love that mindset of the team, of you and your wife being a team, one flesh union, going through those steps together of seminary, then the mission field, making decisions as one flesh, as a husband and wife team. I think that is so important, and I think it can prevent, on the one hand, a husband domineering the wife and the household with, this is what I'm pursuing, this is what I want to do, and also the wife recognizing that she has that role of encouragement and support as you go through that process of taking classes in seminary and pursuing what the Lord's called you to do. It also allows there to maybe be a lessening of a chance for bitterness or resentment to creep in as you go through the ups and downs that will inevitably come with being married and even having children while being in seminary. So I appreciate you sharing that. As I've thought through what y'all have walked us through up to this point, I take y'all were married pretty young, had kids pretty early into marriage, and we're in seminary for at least a handful of years while kids were in diapers, and there was a move across the country in there. Ashley, it sounds a little bit like you knew what you were getting yourself into early on, but that's a lot. That's a lot for a young couple to go through, especially young parents and in early stages of married life. I would imagine that there are some listening to this episode at some point in the future who who are young and they're recently married and they may have young children in the home, and seminary might require a move, and then ministry opportunities coming about as all of those moving parts are at play. I just want to hear from you, your perspective on any advice or lessons that you learned as you were baptized by fire, because I speak as a relatively young husband, been married for 7 years now, and we have two young children. But we didn't have children when we started out, and we weren't moving across the country either in the early stages of our marriage. So, um, the floor is yours. Share with us how the
Okay.
Lord has taught you and refined you throughout the crazy providence that God has orchestrated in your life and in your marriage.
Okay, so I was 22, I think, when we got married, and our first two kids are about 13 months apart, and then Maeve came 2.5 years later. So they were very young, and they were very close together. Um, the Lord gives strength in the moment. He does not give you strength for the week ahead. And so some of that grace and the strength to get through a lot of the basically two babies, like almost twins, comes moment by moment that the Lord gives us. And I think I had to remind myself of that some. But the other, so I would say two things with that. One was Michael was always present. Michael never made me feel like seminary was coming before me. And he always made me feel he would get up in the middle of the night with the babies. He spent time with me when he got home from work. And he would get up really early to do seminary. He would stay up later than me to do the classwork. He was very self-disciplined. So I never felt like I was losing him to anything, because I always knew if for some reason the kids were having their little meltdowns or whatever it was, he would drop whatever he was doing and he would be there, and he would step in, he would help, and then go back to class. But he made sure that I always felt like I was the priority, and this came later, and I felt that. And so it was very, very easy for me when he would say, "Hey, can I audit a Latin class?" Be like, "If that is what you want to do, go for it. Like, I don't want to take Latin, but you love it, so have fun and enjoy it." Because I knew if I genuinely needed him, he would be there. And the other thing that he did that at the moment I didn't realize, we hadn't discussed it, and it was so critical and so important, is he came in one day with a massive desk calendar, all of his syllabi, and just handed them to me and said, "You give me my schedule." And I was like, "What?" Like, what do you want me to do? And he was like, "You know the family schedule, put it on the calendar, and then put my schedule in on top of that." And I was like, "Okay." So, you block off Sunday. Sunday's going to be our day of rest, or a family day, or whatever it is. And you, as a wife, know, hey, this kid has a piano recital. We've got 4 days off for Thanksgiving. We're going to our parents' house. You need this time free. We've got all these things around Christmas or in the church. As women, we tend to have like a better handle on what is coming up. And then I took the syllabi, and he said, "I need like 2 weeks to write a paper." So it was like, okay, the paper's due here, back 2 weeks, and then it was like, add up all the page numbers that needed to be read, divide them out by however many days were left that weren't like a family commitment. And then he knew how many pages he needed to read every day to stay on track, when the papers were due, and that fit within the family structure. And that also releases bitterness, because I made the schedule. And so, I'm very schedule oriented. I really like it. I can be flexible, but if it's written in the planner, well, then that's Medes and Persians. Like, that is what it's going to be. And so I remember being in labor with our, maybe it was our first one. And I was like, "You've got 75 pages to read today." And he's like, "No, I'm here and I'm with you." And I'm like, "No, you have 75 pages to read. Like, I have an epidural. I'm just watching TV. Like, go read." And he didn't do that, but I wouldn't have cared, because I made the schedule. And so I think that releases bitterness for a wife, because what would tend to happen if you don't do that, and I want to say this to everybody: everyone's cultural context is different, and everyone's marriage is different. This is what we found that was helpful. Please don't take any of this as like, you have to do this. Because I know other people's marriages, they're not so like codependent as we are, but we live overseas. We have to depend on each other. So our dynamic is different than others. But this worked for us. We thought it worked well, and I hope it would help somebody else. But if a husband just is like, hey, I'm taking these classes without talking to his wife, and you sign up for some like really tough classes, and then all of a sudden last minute you find out, wait, we have these family obligations, the church has these things going on, then you're going to be irritated and frustrated because you're not able to get done what you know that you need to get done. All of a sudden you're 4 days behind schedule because we were going to family Thanksgiving and you didn't factor that in. So now you're rushed and you're panicked and you're, irritated because you don't have the time to get done what you need to get done. And she's going, we have family obligations. So by communicating and sitting down with a calendar at the beginning of the semester, even to say, hey, is there anything really intense coming up that you know is coming up? So you don't sign up for a Greek 3 class when like your wife's gonna, like you factor in the craziness of life into your seminary classes and pick and choose, and you can't totally do that, but you can in a lot of ways. And so that was probably the most practical and helpful thing that we did. And that's part of how it looked practically for us going to seminary, because I have no desire to take his classes. Like I enjoy hearing what he learns, but like that is not my thing. And so when he says we did seminary, he really stressed to me, this is impacting our family. Our family is going through this together, even though I'm taking the classes. So make the schedule, talk through what do we have time for this semester. Is there any, we talk regularly, hey, is our priority out of order at the moment, like coming up? Is there anything that we need to adjust? Is there anything we need to drop out of so that we can take care of everything we need to do, but our children never feel, like they're not getting the best of us?
This
Yeah.
is really excellent. Go ahead, Professor.
No, I was just going to kind of affirm what she said, that when I say we are doing seminary, it's not just a mindset, but I try to actually include her in the process of it, because I think she's exactly right. The more, especially for guys who are maybe newly married, and all of a sudden you got a lot of time you got to spend studying. If your wife can enter into that, even if by it saying, all right, here's all the pages, I got to read 1,000 pages in the next 2 months, can you please divide those out for me on the days that will fit our schedule? Then she knows, oh, he's got to read this many pages today. You also know, because now you're getting your work done on time, but it brings everybody together that we are going through this. And I think that's just, it's helpful, and it kind of alleviates conflict that could arise if you're spending so much time doing things that you need to do to graduate.
Mm, mm. This is such a useful conversation. I think we can make application to people who aren't even actively in seminary. I know that there are uh, men in ministry that have heavy ministerial responsibilities who could easily take these principles and say, honey, please help me to uh, look at the calendar with wisdom, so that way I can prepare 2 sermons a week and still spend time with you and not make you feel lonely and things like that. So,
Absolutely.
I,
And go ahead, Smalls, go ahead.
I was going to say, Michael does do that. If
mm,
someone comes from the church and says, hey, can I meet with you? He'll always say, let me talk to Ashley, or let me look at the calendar. Like if he doesn't want to put it on me, let me look at the calendar, which means me. And then I'll say, hey, the kids have something Thursday night, Tuesday night, maybe Monday would be the best day. And so we do communicate even on church matters and fit it around our kids, because we never want our kids to feel like they don't have their parents, or they don't have their attention,
yes.
or that the church is coming before them.
Yeah.
I would say you're exactly right, Austin. I mean, so many of these principles can be applied to almost anything here, I think. But again, for pastors, maybe you graduated seminary and you're pastoring a church, I think a question that you can ask your wife every so often is, how are we doing on this priority order?
Mhm.
Where are we? Do we feel like we've got everything good? Do you feel like you're number two? Because it, good things can easily creep up and cause you to move, ministry, church related things higher and higher above kids, above your wife. And your wife may not say anything, and it just might build resentment. And so, if you can have that conversation, you both know here's the priority order, here's what we need to stick to. That's the question you kind of ask each other, really, until the day you die.
Well said. We're going to give you an opportunity to bring in any other final advice or any other thoughts that you want to bring in, but I'm having some of my own that I want to just ask in the conversation. You may have not given a lot of thought to it. So if we need to edit, we always have that liberty. But um, you've emphasized in this conversation really how important it is to be one team, openly communicating on the same goal. I mean, sharing struggles. And do you think that if a married man wants to go to seminary and his wife is opposed, ordinarily that would be God's providential sign that he shouldn't? What do you think? I'll ask Michael first.
That's a great question, and I don't at the moment I wouldn't say, well, there's one answer that's going to cover every situation. Um, I think what I would want to do is sit down with the couple and maybe ask the wife, why do you think he shouldn't go? What are the concerns that you have about this? Right? Maybe there are legitimate concerns, and legitimate concerns need to be taken legitimately. uh, at the same time, if it's just, oh well, I don't like this idea. All right, maybe some conversations can be had there. But so having said that, qualified that each individual case, you've got to kind of talk to the couple. I would say if the wife is uncomfortable with it, saying this is not a good idea, I don't think this is going to serve our family. I think the husband really needs to kind of take that into consideration. Why? Because of the priority order. Your responsibility as a husband is number two under your walk with God. Seminary, your job, that's way down fourth. And if you're going to say, I don't really care about what my wife says, I'm going to do this anyway, immediately you've elevated that number four spot all the way up. And that immediately is going to cause friction, which, if it's destroying your marriage, then again, you've disqualified yourself for the very job you're trying to pursue. When before we became missionaries, Ashley said I went to Ireland for a visit. I came back, we got married a couple months later. Um, I hadn't ever planned on returning to Ireland, but once Pastor Stephen Murphy sent me that email asking if we'd be interested, I told Ashley, let's go visit. If you are uncomfortable, if you don't like living here, don't think you can, then we're not going to do it, because I knew that would not be healthy for us as a couple, with our family. And so I'm not putting the entire decision on her, but to hear, what does she think? If this is a no from her, then I need to take that into consideration as a husband, as to say, okay, maybe this is not the direction the Lord would have us to go.
Hmm.
And so we try to filter everything, questions even like that, through that priority order.
Excellent. Excellent. I have another one before another final question answer. It seems like you guys, by God's grace and God helping you, did an excellent job communicating with each other throughout the experience that you went through. And that seems like a key foundational thing if anyone's going to survive seminary. Ashley, you seem to really understand, at least from the communication that you had with your husband, the amount of work that was going to be necessary to complete this. Like 75 pages a day of reading doesn't take most people 20 minutes. I need to be alone, or at least deeply thinking in a way that I'm not giving you attention right now. Um, would you maybe be able to speak to some of the ways that you could help wives understand how to forbear with this amount of workload, or at least to be expecting it, or what they should think about whenever they think about their husbands entering seminary? I mean, this is not just like another seminary paper that's due once per week. How can wives better understand how much their husbands are going to be doing so that they don't grow bitter with them in this process?
Maybe it's because one, we communicated a lot, and Michael was working from home as he's doing seminary. He's not, like up at the church working, so you don't see it. I'm seeing him working. And so I know how much time is going into each of these elements. And he'll say to me now, like, every sermon is like writing a term paper once a week. That takes time. So this is not like a once and done, we get done with seminary and then all of a sudden, like, you've got free time. This is a job that um is not regular 9 to 5. And if that is what I mean, if you're in the States and you've got great deacons and you've got a plurality of elders, okay, it might be a little more 9 to 5. But when you're overseas, we didn't have deacons until 3 years ago. And a plurality of elders is a luxury item, because it's just not there. And so, for the seminary students that are like through the rest of the world, once you get through seminary, that's just kind of the start. And I don't say that to be discouraging, but as a like, this is kind of what it looks like. And if this is what is frustrating you now and you can't get through that, well, then maybe this is a conversation that we need to have as a family, that this might not be the best thing for us as a family. And that's okay too. Find something that you enjoy. If you are just sitting around every night waiting for him to get finished with his classes, and some of that bitterness, you would get frustrated. So I have things that I do that I genuinely enjoy and are just for me. I take cooking classes online, that serves the family, and I enjoy doing it. And then I have something that I'm working on that's using my mind. I'm growing as a person, but still within the context of family. I'm not like off, like, in left field, not with everyone. So I'm not like working on yourself. I don't mean it like that, but it's, you need something to do that is mentally stimulating for you. So you're not just sitting there waiting on him. Because otherwise you're going to be going like, seriously, 15 more minutes.
I think, sorry, Smalls, if I jump in here really quick, I think part of this answer is also what we said early on. It's both of you together recognizing this is an us thing. If I had to read, well, I did. If I had to read 75 pages a day to get done with my reading for, the 3-4 classes I'm taking at once, if we're on the same page saying this is us doing this together, then hopefully that conversation is being had between husband and wife. And so the wife knows, all right, this is what we're doing at this point in our life to reach this goal. And yes, it's going to continue on when you become a pastor, but this is us moving forward through seminary. This is us moving forward as he's going to pastor a church or you be missionaries. This is us going forward. And so part of it is recognizing on the wife's part also, yes, he's got to do a lot of reading, but it's us together moving forward in this. He's getting this done. He's got to spend the time because we are moving ahead. And the more that you keep that priority order and think in terms of us together, I think that helps with bitterness, and it also helps with, okay, maybe you do have a lot of reading, but the kids are crying and your wife needs help. All right, I'm going to stop reading and I've got to go help my wife get these kids back in order. And if I have to stay up an hour extra tonight, well, so be it. I'll do it then. but I've got to take care of my family first. It's always us moving forward.
Just very practically speaking, finding ways to mentally stimulate yourself and have wholesome activities to be doing. I think that that can be very practical and very useful. Um, I do want to give you guys though the opportunity to give the final thoughts that you may have prepared, or any other tips, advice, or things that you want to bring to bear upon our listeners as we think about this important subject of surviving seminary as a family.
I'll just say seminary doesn't have to be a time where families and marriages struggle. I have seen I've seen that happen, but it doesn't have to be that. And I think if we take marriage seriously, that the goal to get through seminary is to maybe be a pastor, go on the mission field. There's good things that are the end goal of going through seminary, that all those good things can easily be done away if you sacrifice your marriage on the altar of seminary or ministry. And so live in light of really of Ephesians 5, right? For husbands to love their wives in such a sacrificial way, that what that's going to look like going through seminary is you're still in the midst of it, putting your wife, your family above your studies. You still have to get it done. That's why you're talking, you're having these conversations, you're getting her involved. She can do the calendar, let her divide it up how you're going to study and when. Um, but but love your wife more than seminary. That would be my advice. Love your wife more than seminary.
Amen. Ashley, do you have any other thoughts that you wanted to leave with us?
Um, I was just thinking the reason we got off well in marriage is we spent the entire first year studying marriage, and we hours of listening to sermons, reading books, really grounding ourselves in what God has called us to do in our marriage. And when you have grounded yourself so thoroughly in a biblical priority order, it becomes second nature to think this way. And um, it becomes easier to stay where you need to mentally. You're not going to get pulled into bitterness or other like irritation and frustration, because you are so convicted that this is what God has called me to do. This is where He has placed me. I am called to be a helper to my husband. I'm called to be a mother to my kids. And that releases all the comparisons or the pressure to conform to be like anyone else. And it's very freeing. And so I'm thankful for the time that we spent doing that. And if your husband, if you can see the joy that he has in seminary and he is loving learning, why would I begrudge him that? And when we were in Houston, that was some of the happiest that I've seen Michael is studying the biblical languages. He loved it. And so it was very, very easy to release him to that and let him have that joy, um, because I could see how much joy it was bringing him. And so you can't be bitter. You can't be frustrated when you see how happy your spouse is doing something that really, really fulfills them.
Mm. Amen. Before Dewey closes us, I just want to say thank you, Ashley, for sharing your husband,
Mhm.
because he's been greatly useful to several because of your sacrifice. So thank you. And
Mhm.
yeah, through you indirectly, I know more about chiasms and Hebrew accent markers and discourse and syntax and vocabulary. And so I'm thankful to you and both of you and your ministry to serving the body of Christ. Go ahead, Dewey.
I'll just completely reiterate everything you just said about Michael's impact for the kingdom, and Ashley's role in enabling at the human level, enabling the Lord to use Michael in all of these ways that that Austin has just expressed. And I would encourage our listeners too to really heed the counsel that's been given today. I specifically want to commend Ashley's perspective on the fact that seminary is just the beginning of the rigors of pastoral ministry. I'm in the States. It is not a 9 to 5 job. It is a 24/7, 365 day year calling. And we have to be wise in the ways that we prepare sermons, counsel God's people, love God's people, lay our life down for God's people, but to do all of that without sacrificing our marriage or our family on the altar of ministry. And that takes a team collaborative effort between a husband and wife and prayerful dependence upon the Lord to grant wisdom in making those decisions. So don't fall into the trap, listener, of thinking that I'll just get through seminary, it's a grind now, and then it's all going to be okay. It only gets tougher, most likely. So listen to this couple's advice, and and make sure that you're following that proper biblical priority order that Michael and Ashley have set forth before us today. Thank you guys so much for joining us. It's been a delight to listen to your testimony and just to continue to admire from afar the work that God's doing in your family and in your ministry. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having
Thanks
us.
for having me.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. To our listeners, we want to say thank you as well, as always, for your continued support of the Covenant Podcast. If you were blessed by today's conversation, we would encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're not done so already. Check us out on social media. You'll be able to access other edifying resources and stay in the loop with what God is doing through the ministry of Covenant Baptist Theological Seminary. But until next time, we wish you grace and peace. God bless.